Hey, what's up? It's Phoenix. I'm super stoked about today's video, super excited. I wanted to talk about identity because I've been thinking about identity and how unstable identity actually is, at least the way that it can be observed, where change is always occurring in the environment, in the world, in reality, and so we respond to that change, but then we ourselves are changing because of impacts and influences in our lives, a variety of beliefs that we might encounter and that might change what we believe. So the flexibility of belief systems or values or the engagement with ideas, whatever it is, identity is not fixed, it seems, and seems to be more fluid and flexible in the sense that we are not the same person that we were across time. And even while there might be some consistency, it's very interesting to engage with the idea that it's actually very unstable and actually asking the question of whether or not consciousness is even stable or linear or consistent across time, and whether it's actually stable and continuous, as they say. But the reason why this is interesting to me is because I often think about my own identity in the context of mental illness, also in the context of dissociation. And in both of these worlds, you understand the reality that your identity is unstable, that it's constantly being challenged and threatened. And it's kind of a hard thing because I recognize that with my own situation in life and thinking about the metaphor of dissociation as being part of unstable identities or multiple identities, it's certainly interesting to recognize that there's a lot more to it, to a lot more that makes me who I am than I might be aware of. And all of the things that are constantly changing me, and all of the things that are changing within processes of the unconscious mind that I'm not even aware of. And that I'm not aware of how it's changing me and making my identity discontinuous. And so the reason why I bring this up is because I think I've actually been plagued, especially over the past little while, by my identity, by trying to understand who I am. Because I've recognized that it's too unstable. And I'd like to have a firm identity, maybe not a fixed identity, but a firm identity, a strong identity, where I feel like I know who I am, and I feel like I know what I believe, and I feel like I know what I want to say and what my ideas are and what I think, and who I am as a person living in Salt Lake City, Utah. And so it's super interesting to me because I've been asking this question quite a bit, trying to understand why I allow my identity to be so fluid and so ambiguous, where I don't set very strong boundaries, it seems, in life. Whether that's ideological, intellectual, in terms of ideas, or even in terms of the social world and the environment in which I find myself in. And the reason why fixed identities are so useful is because it helps you survive. But I had for a long time internalized the notion that my identity needed to be fluid, that it needed to be flexible, that it needed to be porous. I liked the idea of it being ambiguous because it meant that I wasn't fixed and it meant that I wasn't just one thing. But it's hard because while you can look at this philosophically and think about the lack of continuity in our identity, in our consciousness, in our reality, in our existence on this planet, it can be a very difficult thing because you realize that you actually really struggle if you're too fluid. And so I've been trying to understand this because I have acknowledged that I am gay. And so what that means is I have aspects of my identity that I hope are fluid, but that I realize is part of who I am. And especially the way that it's socially constructed, I recognize that it is a big part of who I am. And that while I wouldn't say that it's fixed per se, because even on the Kinsey scale it's fluid, I recognize that if I'm going to be who I am, I need to be aware of what my identity actually is. And that can be super tough for a lot of reasons. It can be super tough to try to understand what to do, because obviously this goes beyond just our sexual orientation, as important as that is for our lives. Because I recognize that I have always wanted to encounter the ideas that surround me. And I've always wanted my identity to be ambiguous because I want to understand where other people are coming from. But what I've realized is I've become too unstable in my identity. And this is why mental illness is such a powerful metaphor for it. Because mental illness is all about a kind of unstable mentality or mental realm. And it can be super difficult because your mind works in this complicated, disconnected way where things seem to be going wrong in your internal state of being, in your subjective state of being, and it can be really difficult to try to understand who you are. It can be difficult to try to understand what you really think, what you believe, what you want to do, and not get influenced by the deluge and by the whole wave of the world around you. And so while it's true that the environment might overpower us, and that might lead to a lot of problems, I also look at it from the perspective of like, I'd like to have an identity because I'd like to know who I am. And maybe the interesting question here is that I talk about identity because I don't really know who I am. And even after all of my soul searching and digging in deep and trying to understand my consciousness and my mind, I still don't know who I am. And now that can be kind of a traumatic experience, you could say, because you don't know what to do. You don't know what to think. You're too influenced by the things around you. And I totally understand that this comes from good intentions. It's from wanting to understand the world around you, a kind of openness to experience, an openness to ideas. And all of this is great. These are wonderful values to have. But there's the other component that I recognize, which is maybe there's a part of me that actually wants to be fixed. Maybe a part of me that doesn't budge. And it's so hard because I recognize that I never wanted to be so obstinate or monolithic in my views, telling people what to believe, telling them what I think that they should think, telling them who they have to be. And I recognize that that's probably why I need a strong identity. But it's definitely been hard for me to gauge and to create because I realize that I'm constantly in flux for all the reasons I've mentioned and more. Just how powerful change is, for instance, the change that is both internal and external. And so I recognize the complexity, and I recognize that it's definitely a question worth asking. Who am I really? So yeah, I'm Phoenix. I hope you enjoyed this video. Just something I kind of been turning around in my mind trying to figure out because I think it's a very complicated, difficult thing and I can't always make sense of it. But I think the question of identity is important. I hope that you'll check out my other videos on my channel. I hope that you also check out my books. Give this video a like if you enjoyed it, and I suppose a dislike if you didn't like it. But hey, you know, feedback is great. I appreciate it. I hope that you like this video, and I hope that you'll check it out. I'm Phoenix. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.